Hi there, all of you, and thanks so much for joining us again on Finding Peace with Carol Howe. We can always use more peace. I never cease to be amazed at the ingenious ways we can use that astounding creative ability of ours to get in our own way. Not that we do that on purpose. But we can never stop being endlessly and powerfully creative since that's our basic nature. It's just inherent in our existence in the first place. And since our so-called outer world is every moment being created by our mostly unexamined and fear-driven beliefs, you can see how this could happen. Now, for sure, we cannot turn off our power to create, although sometimes we wish we could. You'd think, okay, universe, would you please stop listening to me and reflecting back every second? Just give me a break. So the only choice left is to look at and upgrade the things we believe, since they are serving as a matrix or a pattern of thoughts through which this powerful, creative light of our being is always shining. And the result of that shining is our daily world in all its aspects. So if the things we believe are not primarily loving and generous, then that matrix of ideas through which our power shines, including early conditioned notions of our lack of worth and lack of importance and our right to be valued or heard, all those issues, well, it shows up in our lives as unpleasant, upsetting, limiting, or disastrous circumstances, or relationships, or situations, or more. So much of this matrix of belief lies outside of conscious awareness, where it runs our lives, our decisions, a lot of automatic responses, unfortunately in a self-defeating manner that just leaves us feeling bereft, often, and we have no idea why. Well, today's guest is onto something. He writes that he suspects he might have self-respect issues. Well, that would be common to everybody on the planet at one degree or the other. And that leads to boundary issues, and then it's down the slippery slope to self-sabotaging decisions and anger and inability to hear ourselves. It's just a mess. One thing we have to keep in mind is that since others can instinctively detect our assumptions about ourselves, though we possibly are blind to them, they return the favor, so to speak, and treat us like we, unbeknownst to us, perhaps are treating ourselves. Remember, if you don't appreciate you and listen to you, it will seem like no one else does either. And you deserve better than that. So join us today, and we're going to see how important it is to become one's own best cheerleader. So thank you for joining Ben and myself as we actually start to look at and unravel some of these unexamined ideas he's still holding on to from long, long ago. And I'm going to trust we'll all learn something important. The reason I just love doing this work is that I always hear myself say something that I know is a message for me, as well as for the other person. We are so in this together. So here we go. Hello, Ben. Are you there?
Hi, Carol. I'm here. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks a million for writing in, and with your long list of things, we could talk for 3 days, but we won't.
Really?
But one of the things you said was probably paramount, and that would be, you wondered about your sense of boundaries and self-respect. So Since a lot of the things you mentioned were really important, but that is so fundamental to everything, why don't you tell me about that first?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm just thinking about, I was just with my wife's family, which were very nice people. There was about 20 of us staying in a house for Thanksgiving. And I guess a couple things. One of the things that really struck me is that my wife's sister, who I think is a very neat person, she got sick. And I just found the thoughts going through my head. I would do anything to help her feel better, even if it meant getting sick myself. And I thought, where is that coming from?
Right.
That was one thing. And then the other thing is that I found that I just can't eat while everybody else is eating, because I think I'm very sensitive to other people's energy or something, and I just find that I have no appetite while other people are eating. I don't know if it's because I want to serve them. I don't really understand what it is, but I just know that I can digest my food a lot better if I wait till an hour after everybody else has eaten, or if I eat before they do. And I just can't eat with everybody else. I don't want to eat the food. So it seems like these are boundary issues to me, kind of.
Well, it also makes me wonder if it's am I deserving or worthy issue. In other words, to literally not be able to eat because of needing to serve other people or something like that, or not be able to do, or to feel such great distress that you can't function because you ought to be able to be helping someone else. Does that ring a bell? In other words, have you ever explored, why do I so desperately feel that I need to help someone? Because this is not, it doesn't sound like it's coming from a clear, true sense of altruism. It feels like I'm trying to help somebody because if I don't, something awful is going to happen.
I think let's go to the example of my wife's sister being sick, because I think that the food thing is something different. But with my wife being sick, I think there's kind of a feeling of that my wife's family is pretty tight-knit, of not quite belonging. And so there's kind of a feeling of that, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, you guys are on a different wavelength, that's fine. My wife's a smart one. She chose me, Well, but that's a very important thing you just said. In other words, the idea that, they're very tight-knit and possibly I don't quite belong. That, although that's a very short sentence, that contains a huge amount of information. In other words, have you ever had that experience before of, I'm not sure I belong, I'm not sure I fit in, I'm not really sure what I'm allowed to do. In other words, I'm not really sure about possibly a number of things. Just what does my making that statement bring for you? I would probably say that I'm the only one in the family that's studying the course.
Yeah.
And I think I've been drawn to this kind of thinking since I was like 5. It's just part of who I am. And I think it's a little bit unusual in our culture, especially for men. And so, I don't know. I think that might have something to do with it. Or maybe it's just...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I understand about being drawn to it since you were young, since I was too. In other words, when I was 4 or 5, I was thinking something's not right here. Something is missing here. And I've spent my entire very long life in pursuit of this, which is why I do what I do now. But that's different from a sort of not belonging. In other words, I realized that my interests were not the same as others, and I realized that most people would think the things I'm interested in are a little weird. I kind of got used to that a long time ago. But a sense of not belonging and kind of being disconnected is something else, because although I knew that I had different interests and marched to a different drummer, I always felt like I belonged. In other words, so those two are two different separate things. So I want to look at the feeling like you don't belong part. Is that something that has been with you for a long time?
With her family?
Or no, just in life in general. What about in your earlier times?
Let me think for a second. Well, definitely when I was a kid, there's definitely being in high school and stuff, it's not a really conducive place for some people. And it wasn't so conducive for me. I mean, there were moments that were good, but a lot of it was pretty painful. And middle school too. I was just talking with my wife about that because we're homeschooling our kids, and how basically something happened that I put on my list too, which is that we were horsing around yesterday, and I was doing some sit-ups, and my son hit me right in the face right while I was going up, and I just couldn't even hold myself back. I just got so furious, and I kind of was asking myself, so what's that about? What made me lose control? And I flashed back to being 12 and getting beat up, not doing anything to anybody and just getting beat up, in 7th grade or something, and just going man. And there was some guy that was kind of wimpy and smart also and Jewish like me across the hall. Nobody beat him up. And I was like, why doesn't he get beat up and I do? What? He needs a jerk too.
And that is a marvelous question, and probably, unfortunately, you didn't have any answer then.
No.
and this doesn't make any sense. It looks like, we're apples and yet we're being treated like apples and oranges kind of thing. And that's because we can't help but let people know energetically what's going on with us. In other words, most of our communication with our fellow human beings is at an energy level. We can monitor the words that we say, and to a lesser extent, we can monitor our facial expression or tone of voice, but you can't monitor your energy field. It's just right there. And when we don't feel deserving or okay about ourselves or important or belonging or something like that, and we are shutting down, whether we realize it or not, to try to defend ourselves against the pain from that, it's like we might as well be broadcasting that on a television set.
Yeah.
And people respond to that.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense when you look back at some things in your life?
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
And this, by the
Go
way, and it's so important that you hear this and maybe change your mind about some things right now today, and that is, this is not something you deserve. This is not something that's punishment for something. This is not because you are lesser. This is because the particular mix of programming that came together partly before you were born, since some of our programming we inherit through our ancestral DNA. And then all the stuff that happens in our very early years where we misconnect the dots of all kinds of signals that we're getting from the environment around us because the brain is immature and it doesn't have the horsepower to connect the dots properly. So all of us go through those first early years and come out at 6 or 7, every one of us with a skewed, inappropriate, inaccurate, unhelpful mix of ideas about ourselves. And this is not a matter of being wrong. It's not a matter of anybody's fault. It's a matter that the one thing that is the problem, not a specific problem to you, but to humankind, is that this programming in our brains, which is just like a computer program in a sense, we grow up, our brains finally mature, the body's finally mature, but we're still operating from, you might say, that infantile programming. In other words, we're still defending against things that we learned to defend against when we were 6 months old, kind of thing, as an instinctive reflex against pain, either physical or psychological. So somewhere in all of that mix back in your very early days, you came out with the false conclusion of inherently not being okay, like every single human being to one degree or the other does. We have various flavors, like 31 flavors of ice cream, but it's all ice cream. And we're all wounded. And we spend our lives trying to defend against more wounding and trying to export our guilt. And we all do the same things until finally some of us go, there has got to be a better way to live than this. And clearly, you have asked that question, and as far as I'm concerned, if A Course in Miracles has found you, because I'll swear it finds us rather than we finding it, then you have decided, I'm going to the heart of the matter, and I'm going to get this healed. Now, you may not have realized that you've made such a declaration, but you have, if the Course has come into your life. Now, what do you think about all that big mouthful of stuff?
I mean, a lot of things have come into my life. The Course has come in fairly, both recently and not recently. I'm trying to think what's relevant here. Yeah, I guess it's not right that recent. I would say it's probably been 30 years or so.
Right. But
I just started studying it.
I was going to say, so many people say, oh, I've had it for 12 years or 15 years or 8 years, and I just couldn't make myself read it until now. So I've never heard of a book that gathers dust for so many years on so many shelves before it finally, hits home in some way. But the important part is not how long you've been doing the Course or how it entered into your life. It did enter into your life in response to a heartfelt sense of, I need some answers, or there's got to be a better way to live, or what is the matter here? In other words, there has been a sincere desire not to just medicate yourself, self-medicate, or possibly other kind of meditating, or drink, drug, and stare at your phone. In other words, some part of you has said, I'm not willing to settle for that blanked out kind of a life.
I think the last thing that happened was I got very involved in something external. That was the job that just ended a couple months ago after a long time. I got very involved in it externally, like just really focusing on how it was going and whether I was making the right moves or not, and how to be like a spiritual right livelihood manager and all this kind of stuff. And then at a certain point what happened is other people started moving the pieces around that were my pieces, and I got really mad. And then I had to talk to myself and go like, okay, so this has happened. Would I really be happy if they just put the pieces back if I asked them to and put everything back the way it was? And I realized that I wouldn't be happy and that I needed to open up to like a bigger paradigm.
Right.
And I think that like not long after that, that's when the Course came back in my life. And then I wanted to share this story. It's so interesting is I started studying the Course in April this year. And then, like, after about a week, I kept on getting this voice saying, like, your job's not to worry about money. That's already taken care of. Your job is not, you don't have to worry about money. Mm-hmm. And then I kept on hearing that voice, and then, like, I went in this meeting, like, about 6 weeks later, and they let me go. They said, we want you to resign. And I was just like, wow, I've been doing this for, like, 13 years. And I was kind of like, okay, I just graduated.
Well, and were you given any reason?
Yeah, they said that they couldn't move forward with me. They had just done a bunch of reorganizing and all this, and the thing is that I think about 3 years before that I just got this really clear signal from God or something, from the highest part of myself, that I was not supposed to work at this job anymore, that there wasn't really a future in it for me. And but like I just had a baby, and it's like health insurance and money coming in and all that, and I was like, I told my mom, I think I need to leave my job. And she was like, well, don't do it. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
Well, if you don't leave when you're supposed to, then the job leaves you as you have a chance to find out. It's like, well, whatever that was about, because it sounds like this job was not one that made your heart sink. This didn't sound like, I just love doing what I'm doing.
Well, I did. And then at a certain point, I was just like, there's something missing. And what is that? And I actually did this like shamanic thing where I went down to the underworld to ask. This is before the Course came out. And I got that I wasn't using my voice. Like nobody wanted to listen to me anymore. Nobody wanted to, like, everybody was just kind of closed to anything I would say. And they thought I was a jerk. But I knew I wasn't. I was very clear about that. I just had a different style, that's all. And so that was kind of like, boy, this kind of sucks. I mean, I like it when people listen to me. And then I kind of found that I didn't even want to talk to them either. I mean, like, I just kind of felt like I'm in defensive mode here. Nobody wants to listen to my ideas. And so, this is not this is kind of hostile territory, and this isn't fun. So, and I'm kind of putting out that my next job, maybe my signal will be a little bit better, and I'll be in an environment that helps me to really flourish whatever I'm doing, and do it really in a way that's, I don't know, one way or another. I won't be putting out those signals I was putting out when I was 12.
Well, you have just said a mouthful. And so let's go back and decode this a little bit. When you say this was, getting to be annoying because people weren't listening to you and you knew you had good ideas and something to say and so on, one of the things that should be broadcast every night, everywhere on the news is something like, other people treat us the way we treat ourselves. So that when you feel like you're in an environment where you're being kind of ignored and people aren't listening to you and they aren't appreciating you and they're not supporting you and giving your gifts and so on, remember your environment is a mirror of what's going on in your own thinking process. It's like the world is like a big diagnostic machine. It's like an MRI of your thought processes. And so that's why there's a seamless whole between what's happening in your so-called outer world. It's not as outer as we think. It's happening in our own minds. And our thought processes and what we believe. And the problem is a lot of what we have believed, we don't even realize we believe. So much of it is unconscious. And because it's unconscious, we have this kind of merciful, although that's an odd word to use, a kind of merciful situation where the world is showing up so we can look at it. I'm looking out here and waving my hands as if I'm pointing things to you. I kind of get a kick out of myself. It's like you were right in front of me. In any event, it's that I need to see what this is telling me about me. These people are responding to some kind of a signal that I'm putting out here. And this signal has to do, let's start with the not listening part. When people aren't listening to you and take you seriously, what you need to hear very clearly is that part of your early programming was you learned not to take yourself and your wisdom and your ideas and your guidance seriously. In other words, somewhere in there, whether you were shamed or punished for being who you are and so on, because we all go through this identical process, only the forms and the variations are different, but the process is the same for everyone. So let me ask you this, just to give you an example. When you have an intuitive sense of things, like, I think I'll say this, or I would like to do this, or I want to say no here, and I want to say yes here. Do you always follow that, or do you find that your ego programming says, no, I can't do that, or I don't really want to go to dinner with that person, but I guess I will because there's no reason not to. In other words, do you see that there are times when you don't listen to you? To your inner guidance, to your own sense of things?
I would say that there's definitely times. I would say that that's really a big goal of mine is to listen to myself, because, I went through this whole thing when I was in college where I just noticed that you could perceive things in such different ways. I used to use that word perception, which your course uses a lot. Mm-hmm. And I would just be like, I don't know what's true here. And then I kind of was like, well, the truth has got to come from somewhere other than the brain, because you can make a case for anything.
Well, but let's get back to my question, and that is, do you feel like you honor your own sense of things? Do you feel like you honor, I need to do this. No, I don't need to this. I need to say no to this person. I need to say yes to this. In other words, or do you feel like you have lived at least part of your life in a more compromised way internally? Not so much compromised by other people, although they will reflect that, but compromised in the way you get to do your life.
Well, So this whole talk is so interesting because I would say that the job I had for 13 years, like when I first took it, it was like I was doing it part-time, and my wife got involved with me, and I learned, I went to like this retreat center in New York called Omega, and I learned about this teacher named Abraham. And I just got like all these chill bumps going through me when they said, you don't have to do anything. You know, you just do what's joyful. You don't do something that's joyful. You know, it's not going to work out very well. So, and then I was doing this job where I was working these 20-hour days, getting in a truck and driving 3 hours and standing on the pavement all day selling food, and then getting back in the truck and going back home and doing a lot of physical work all day. And the next day I was just wasted. And so I was just like, I don't think I want to do that anymore.
I wouldn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, but it was really exciting while I was doing it. It was very engaging. I mean, it was the most interesting job I ever had. It was just a little too much. So anyway, so what happened is I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to just go out in the world and see what I can manifest. And right around the time I made that decision, I was just doing this part-time, and the guy that was running the department, like, he got really stressed out, hurt himself, and quit. And my wife, who was doing this with me some of the time, she was doing it part-time also with me, she was very interested in taking the job, like becoming the manager of the thing. And I was kind of like, oh, that wasn't what I was going to do. I mean, I had an idea of something really different. And she was really interested in it. So I kind of sat with it for 2 or 3 days. And then, and we kind of, like, one thing we did is we made a list, and I said, well, I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. And some of it was like having to drive the truck at 11 o'clock at night on the way home. And she was like, I'll do that. And we got to the point where I took a long walk, and I just felt really peaceful about it. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then it turned into something where it actually got really good. And I was kind of like, I'll do that, but I need to get up in front of people and talk, like, once a month I need to do a gig, I need to do a show, I need to do some kind of performance or something. And it turned out I was performing all the time because they just had customers coming up to stand all day. And I hired a lot of staff, and it was great.
So the moral of that...
Try and answer your question. I'm kind of like watery. Like I kind of like... there was another one that happened a couple of days ago, and I was so furious at myself because I just had this feeling like there's this homeschool group that my wife is going to, and intellectually I'm curious about it, but a lot of times, like, when it comes time to get in the car in the morning, I don't want to go. And
this is where? And where are you going? I didn't understand that word.
Oh, it's something that we take our kids to, and there's a bunch of other families, and it's a homeschooling group for kids of all ages. And, on the surface it seems interesting, but a lot of times I just don't want to go. And, some part of me doesn't want to go. And so, it's about a half an hour from our house. And so I've been kind of planning on going because I'm thinking I might do some teaching there next year. And then it just is like, I really don't want to go. I've got a little bit of a cold right now, and I just don't want to do that. And so my wife went without me. And then she calls me like a half an hour later, and she says, I forgot some stuff. I have to come home. So she came home, and then I could tell she really wanted me to go. And I kind of gave in. And then, at the end of the day, I was just so sick from, like, standing outside in the cold at the end of the day and stuff. I was so sick, and I was so mad that I had done that. I was just like, wow, this is a real lesson.
That is such an important thing. That is a perfect example of I'm not willing to listen to myself and follow through. You may get the message, this is not for me to do, but somewhere in your early days, and this is just so common for all of us, where in order to stay safe, this is the way we misconnect the dots when we're little, but in order to stay safe, I have to do what someone else tells me to do. And when you're 2 years old, you do. But the problem is there's built into that if I don't do as I'm told, if I don't do what other people say, if I don't get their approval, et cetera, then I will die. Now, as an adult, you don't think you will die, but as a young animal, which you were when you were 1 or 2 years old, when all of this needing to obey stuff was being built in and programmed in, it had a life or death, I will survive or not quality to it, which is why as adults, it's so, these small things seem like they have such a grip on us. I grew up in a household where basically children weren't allowed to say no, which is just really a problem because to get to be an adult and not be able to say no is a very crippling situation. So I had to take that long path back to reclaiming my sovereignty and my ability to say no. And for people who are not afflicted with that particular programming, they can go, what's the big deal? Just say no. Just say I'm not going to do this. Well, what they don't realize is when that's built in at if you don't do this, you will be punished, you will be abandoned, you will be ostracized, you will be humiliated, you might be hit. In other words, the young child is trying to stay alive, and it accommodates itself in whatever way it needs to accomplish the goal of survival. So what I don't want you to do is make yourself wrong or beat yourself up. I want you to see that you've been in the grip of programming that doesn't serve you as an adult. It kept you alive when you were 2, but it doesn't serve you as an adult. And that's why that very thing that is so hard to do, which is to stand up for yourself, say no when you mean no. It's like, no, this doesn't feel like a good use of my time, or whatever it is. You have every right to do it, and you will survive. In other words, it's the way you literally reprogram your brain about this entire topic. What do you think about all that?
Well, part of me wants to defend myself.
Oh, but no, you're not being attacked is the thing.
No, yeah, or say in support of myself that, I mean, well, my wife thinks I'm nuts right now because, I'm not trying to get a job because it's taken care of. I'm just kind of following, I'm trying to follow my inner wisdom, my inner guidance.
Right.
And, and just think about, having a really satisfying day, whatever that happens to be, and have God work through me. Mm-hmm. And so, and she thinks I'm just totally loony. Yeah.
Well, let her. She needs to think whatever she needs to think at the moment. Well, what you need to do, as we all need to do, is to first of all realize it's safe for you to be you. It's safe for you because see, all of us who live with these built-in defenses inherently don't feel safe. That's why everybody's pretty much driven to do whatever they're driven. They don't feel safe under certain circumstances, and so up come the defenses, and we learn many of those. But the problem with all those defenses is that when we hold in and hold back to try to be safe and to try to keep whatever we think is going to get us out, although anything that's getting us, it starts with our own interior processes. But when we close down to defend, we close down across the board. We close down to our good. We close down to our prosperity. We close down to our own resources. We close down to our guidance. It's like closing is closing. And that's why learning to open back up, whether you call it face the fear and do it anyway, which is both a very accurate and a very overused term, but still it's a great one. And this is a gradual process. You don't go just say, okay, I'll do this weekend and then I'm done. This is a lifelong process that we're engaged in. But it means I have to realize that I'm operating out of certain ways of being. I operate a certain way because I'm trying to stay safe. And who wouldn't want to stay safe? But we have to, as adults, realize the only person who's endangering me now is me. because these thoughts in my mind are creating my outer experience. So what I want you to do is to hear in a way that perhaps you've never heard before that you're good, you're deserving, you have every right to shine your light as you are inclined to shine it. And that means just simply your own presence, being present, which you need to open up so that shining can occur. And whatever you are inclined to do in terms of outreach or a job or whatever it is, rather than wondering what anybody else might think about it or whether they will approve of it or understand it or anything else, it's start to do that inner inquiry of you who have some unique gift through your own frequency, your own focus, your own way of doing life, so to speak, and we all need for you to do your thing, whatever it is. You have the right to do it. And as you decide, okay, this seems kind of scary, you will be supported every step of the way. So if I were to ask you, like, what makes your heart sing? Like, do you get an inclination of, what I really want to do is fill in the blank?
Oh, yeah. Well, I know how it feels, and I see a couple of forms about it, but I feel like it's more of a feeling sense more than anything, because you could say, like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, and then stop listening to yourself, and then you get there, and it's kind of like, oh, I thought this is what I wanted to do. But the few things that I've gotten is I'm holding a microphone, I'm on a stage, and I'm talking to 5,000 people, and I'm entertaining them, and I'm telling them stories, and I'm telling them things that are related to the course that I think are going to be helpful to them in the moment. And there's no plan to it. It's just being totally open to what wants to come through. And
do you have a history of that? In other words, do you have background in performance or entertaining or anything like that?
Yeah.
In other words,
yeah.
Okay, so in other words, this is not like you've done accounting up until now and that this is an entirely different thing to do. In other words, you recognize I'm being most true to myself when I do this.
Yeah, I was an engineer until I was 30. And the last year I was there, I did my first performance. I did a technical paper talk presentation.
Uh-huh.
And I came back and I said to my boss, I really like doing that. Is there a way I can do that more? and then a year later, I was just like, oh, okay, I have to leave. This is not going the way I want it to, and this is not really what I want to be doing once I have kids and stuff. And then, so I'm in this job for a while. But then what happened is I became a manager, and we expanded, and I wasn't doing so much. I even found it wasn't even that satisfying to stand on the pavement and people would come by and often I would counsel them or talk to them or sell them something that could help. And using my intuition is really fun because I could just tell what people would like. I mean, what people would respond favorably to. And
Sure.
Using my intuition is just really a big one. In counseling, using intuition, speaking up in front of 5,000 people or 500 or 50 or teaching.
Sure.
Those are the things. And those are the things that I'm kind of pursuing right now, but kind of in a slow way because I just feel like my kids are really young right now. And, I don't know. I just feel like it's really rewarding to really kind of connect with God through them and get shivers with them. It's really rewarding. And so I kind of feel like, okay, this seems to be what I'm doing right now and it's working out really well at the moment.
Do these have to be mutually exclusive? In other words, can't you be a father to your children and pursue a living that you love doing at the same time? I mean, most people do that.
I think it's already happened. It's just a temporal thing. I'm clearing stuff away right now. I'm studying. I don't know. I mean, I think it's happening as we speak in a way. But some of it is just. It's I always used to say I want this to work out better than I can choreograph.
Well, you see, here's the thing, and. This is a really big thing to say on a first call, but
I can't wait.
But you see, we think, okay, I know that I have this talent. I know what I'm inclined to do. I know what seems to be missing in my life, and then what we have erroneously learned is, okay, I'm moving the chair up a little bit. What's missing in my life? Now I have to go get. Is that not what the world teaches us? That it's like, okay, if it's missing, then go get it. In other words, what I'm now going to do is to go get my career. I'm going to go get my happiness. I'm going to go get my money.
You're hitting the nail on the head, because I think there's a certain fear around this too, because what if it doesn't work?
And you know what? It won't, as long as my focus is getting, because this is why this is a rather advanced topic, so I don't know why I'm being led to tell you this on a very first conversation, but you see, the underlying meta message, so to speak, for any of us when we start down the path of getting is, I don't have. Nobody tries to get what you already have, which is why the Course over and over and over says, to have, give all to all. Or it will say, the only thing that's missing in your life is what you have not given. Now, it's not talking about give away your house, your shoes, your clothes, everything else, although you can give those away if you don't need them anymore. But the implication is if I approach my life in a I don't have, so I have to go get mode, I am constantly the underlying belief, which may not be in your conscious mind all the time, but the underlying belief of I've got to go get because I don't have is I don't have. And that's the declaration, shall we say, that's made to the universe. I don't have. And it goes, okay, because whatever we as sovereign creators declare is so will show up as our lives. Which is why over and over and over again, the emphasis is on giving, not because it's a good thing to do or a moral thing to do or a polite thing to do or a correct thing to do. It's because the underlying declaration with giving is, I already have. Now, so you mentioned, manifesting and so on and so forth. It's like we're always manifesting, but we have to be real clear about, because that is an automatic process that we can't stop. You can't not be manifesting your world around you. And we are always manifesting those most basic underlying beliefs, which is why we have to look inward and say, what is it that I actually believe? Do I actually believe I don't have some things? Because if I do, then I'm going to continue to turn that into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, what do you think about all that?
It's brilliant. It's beautiful.
And so therefore, you might say, we don't get what's missing. We offer what's missing. We give what's missing. You already have your talent, your inclinations, your brains, in other words, everything that any of us need to be the best version of ourselves that we can be is already right here. We may be blind to it, but it's right here in latent form. And I can pop that right into what we will just use in our language as a concrete form when I am 100% behind it. When you go, probably with your talent, your entertaining talent, are you real clear that you're good at what you do?
Well,
or do you doubt it?
Well, I'm a work in progress. I'm good, but I definitely want to get better.
Well, we all want to get better, but we have to start out with a certain sense that, yes, I can do this. You might be scared, and you might not do it as well as, I got an email a beautiful email from a lady in Austria yesterday or sometimes, and she said, you know, I feel like I really want to teach, but I'm a little scared to do it. I mean, I taught my first course class 37 years ago. And I can tell you that my course classes today and my first course class 37 years ago were really, really different. You know, I just barely knew what I was doing. But you have to start wherever you start. And I dragged my feet because I knew I was going to be an unhealed healer. I didn't want to be saying, I mean, I'd only been in the course for a couple of years, at which point, you know, basically nothing at all, comparatively speaking, because it needs time to work on you. Intellectually, I knew it well. But in any event, you just start where you're inclined to start. But the important part is feeling that sense of, I'm just happy to be me. I'm glad that I know what I know and that I'm inclined the way I'm inclined. And I just need to up the ante in my own self-regard. I want to be my own best cheerleader and say, you know what, if this is what I feel inclined to do, I need to be listening to that intuition. You said your intuition was good, so good.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got good intuition, then pay attention to it. I always had good intuition too, but my programming to please other people and not offend people and all of that stuff would get in the way of it, you know, because that's such powerful, strong, trying to stay alive programming. My intuition knew this is what I wanted to do, but I would say no to that and do what was more acceptable or what I thought somebody else needed for me to do. It's very sick. And, you know, I had to grow through a lot of years of getting past all that so that I could very clearly say yes when I needed to say yes and no when I needed to say no. But sometimes it's hard won to move away from that old programming. But absolutely, when you've got the Course as your advocate that is right there holding your hand every step of the way saying, you must rise to the occasion, so to speak, of being you and honoring you. And it's like, that's not being arrogant. This is not being narcissistic. This is not being a braggart. This is like, you were created as brilliant, loving, one-of-a-kind you, and nothing is served by diminishing that in your own mind. Is it?
Mm-mm.
And so you think, okay, I need to just start looking in the mirror and go, you know what, I've compromised myself about a lot of things up to this point because... Now, you didn't necessarily think this every day on a conscious level. You didn't say, I have to compromise and say no when I mean yes and try to please these people or save them from themselves or whatever, because that's what I have to do to be safe. In other words, you may not have put all that together, but that's what drives any of us to do what we have to do that's contrary to our best interest because it's wired in. This is what I have to do to stay alive and be safe. Just take a look at all of the crazy stuff everybody in the world does. And I can tell you that when it's not loving and when it's not expansive and it's not, you know, truly from the heart with peace of mind as its goal, it's because the goal of trying to stay safe has taken over that person's mind. Not because they're wrong or bad or immoral or at fault because they don't know any better. They don't understand the process. This is why my goal is if anybody will listen, we're in the grip of programming until we realize it and change it. Just like our computers get hacked sometimes. You know, I was a systems engineer with IBM for years, and I know a lot about debugging programs, and debugging people is exactly the same thing. You just have to see where the error is and correct the error. You're not correcting the person. You're correcting an error in our thinking. That's very different. You don't need to be corrected or improved or fixed or anything. You, as you are A++, 5 gold stars already. And your job is to open up and claim that. Not to make it so, it's already so, but to claim that it's so by the way you treat yourself. Are you there?
I'm here. I'm writing.
Okay. So I want to know how you feel right now.
Well, some of what you were talking about, I'll just use an example. My dad calls like the things I used to like to talk about that he wasn't interested in because he was kind of just like a doer. Mm-hmm. And not really like a doer who was just kind of like convinced that this is what he was, a piece of meat, that had a brain that was a certain intelligence, more than this person, less than that person or something. Mm-hmm. There is a part of me that just gets angry at myself because I just don't want to do that, but then I'm like looking around me and I was like, well, I got to feed my kids at some point, and I mean,
well, see,
the whole thing about not doing anything and it already happened, it's great, but some days it just looks like, geez, what a flake.
Well, but you see, this is the thing. If people think you're a flake, let them think you're a flake. I remember, speaking of IBM, in my really early days, and I was in my 20s when I went to work there, and because people found out, through one means or the other, that I was interested in a broad range of things that were far outside the field of computers, and every once in a while somebody would say, how can somebody as smart as you are believe some of the stuff you believe? And it's like, well, I just can. Well, it wouldn't be long before these same guys, because basically back in those days, there were virtually no women. This was very much an all-male field. And they'd come and they'd say, could you tell me a little bit more about some of that you believe? So that you just have to be true to what works for you. And so that doesn't mean that you have to sell out like you see your dad doing, or at least living a life that's not yours to live. Then don't live that way. I didn't look. I mean, my parents were more aware, especially my mother, than most parents were in my growing up years. But there were still many ways that they did life that I've had to unlearn, that I would not want to adopt and bring forward. So you can honor the things that you learned from your parents and the fact that they were your parents, but by no means do you want to stay at a level that's not yours to stay at. What would be the point in that? None. That would serve nobody. Regardless of the family situation in which you find yourself, you are still a sovereign, one-of-a-kind expression of love. Don't forget that. So all of this stuff happens at our worldly time and space. We're part of a family level. But above and beyond that, you are words apply that we don't normally apply. And this is to the presence of us, not to the personality of us. That's just a bunch of defenses that we've made up. We've made up a story about the separate person thing. But the who you really are is something priceless and magnificent. And the way that particular configuration of energy that's you wants to show up in this world, you can never be happy and truly successful until you make that contribution that's only you can make. And you cannot compare it to anyone else's, and you must not minimize it. Because if you minimize your gifts, so will everybody else. If you don't support yourself in an inner way, then you will feel unsupported by the people around you. Remember, they're just mirroring how you are treating yourself.
Yeah. I think some of what happened when I ended up getting in the car was there was a little bit of hesitation to listen to myself, especially when she came back, because I had already listened to myself, even though it didn't make sense to me. A little bit of it is, it's like something about fairness, like, well, I'm not working right now, so I should be helping as much as I can. She's pregnant right now, and we got 2 kids already, and she's got a cold also, and I should just be helping as much as I can, and it's not fair for me just to be flaky, quote unquote, or just follow my bliss. And so there's kind of that programmed in there. I think like what happened with my job is like when we were working 70 hours a week, I didn't have any problems with anybody. But then at a certain point, I was just like, wait a minute, this is really ephemeral. And I realized that we had to have kids. You know, there was the next step. And I was like, how am I going to do this with kids? And when you had kids, like I worked a lot less. And I think I felt kind of bad about that. I felt like, you know, these people want me to work 70 hours a week. They really like that. And then I'm not working 70 hours a week anymore. And, you know, now I'm a jerk because I have a family. Or, you know, it was kind of like that. I think that opened it up.
Well, look at what you just now said. I mean, that is definitely not being your own best cheerleader. The idea that I disappointed these people, I didn't do what they thought I ought to do, and so there was some distress abroad in the land. You see, that is such a clear pointer. And like virtually all of us are programmed this way, like this, I need to do what other people think is a good idea for me to do. I don't want to disappoint these people. I don't want them to think I'm a jerk if I don't do what they say to do. This is that boundary thing that you mentioned in your first email, that there is an honoring of who you are. Now, if you occasionally have to stop whatever you're doing, and, you know, like in the case where your wife needs help, that's one thing. I mean, just a run up and back. It's the habitual day after day after day of selling out instead of being true to who you are. That's the poisonous part, you know, that just, it's toxic. Because we don't like it, we're mad about it, and so we kind of mess up our body chemistry through those means. In other words, so like you said earlier in our talk that your son did something and you just, this big flash of anger came up and you think, where did that come from? Well, when we're constantly doing what other people think is a good idea for us to do, whether you realize it or not, whether it's come into your conscious awareness, it makes you really angry, because anger comes from feeling powerless. And you will feel powerless if you think, I want to do this, but I have to do this, I should do this, to be a nice person I have to do that, I can't disappoint these people, etc. So that there is a whole lot of not being true to yourself going on. And by the way, when you are being true to yourself, you will always be offering the very best to your fellow man. It's not like being true to yourself is some kind of a selfish endeavor where you're saying screw you to everybody else. Being true to yourself is always going to involve how you can give your love, your attention, your talent to your fellow man. Being true to yourself is not selfish. Does that give you something to think about differently?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think besides, well, this is popping in my mind. Like, there's a lot of things, maybe I just read over my notes or listen to this recording again, but, like, it seems like a lot of it was like, I said, okay, I mean, I know, like, I listened to your show last week about, you know, just kindly observing, like, the feeling in the pit of my stomach when something comes up or
right.
Like, you know, that was actually so helpful when I heard that. It really was just like, wow, thank God I heard this right now.
Yes.
But then from this talk, I'm trying to think if there's anything that's coming to you as a besides reading over what you've said already, like a concrete thing that would be really helpful to keep in mind. Like, I don't know if that's actually, if there is something, but.
Well, yes, there actually is. And that is, as you're making your decisions, if it feels like decisions, it's like, first of all, keep in mind, you have a right to live your life as it presents itself through you and as you. You don't want to stand in the way and put up a dam in front of your life unfolding. And you can always, well, at least I can always tell, if something is right for me to do, there's going to be a kind of a feeling tone of yes about it. If it's something that I'm doing out of obligation or responsibility and I don't really want to do this and this is so not true to me, I'm not talking about those emergency things here or there. I'm talking about as the baseline of how you're living your life. If it feels flat, like there's not energy in it, then you know it's not yours to do. So that's a way that it's very easy for me to tell if I'm on track or not. So far as, because associated with all of the holding in that you've been habituated doing, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of emptiness, there's a lot of feelings that you don't want to feel. And what's essential is that when those come up, instead of trying to shove them back down or escape from them, is to allow yourself to fully feel them with like a sense of discovery, like, these feelings, if I actually allow them to be here, are going to take me to a place of discovering some of these old ideas I'm hanging on to that I clearly need to let go of. So always, always be in a present moment, and if in this present moment it feels painful or it feels empty or it feels weird or it feels whatever it is, this feeling is your friend and not an enemy. So embrace it. Let it be there. Don't run from it. Don't run to your distractions or addictions. Don't condemn it. Let it lead you where it knows how to lead you. What do you think of that?
Well, that's actually sounds very familiar. That seems to be what I've been learning lately in different places. I guess sometimes I feel like I've got this big opportunity to feel this feeling and not medicate, but it's just so overwhelming. It's just like, wow.
Well, the reason why it's so
I know what I'm supposed to do when I'm sitting because I can't deal with this.
but you see, actually you can. Your ego mind just says, oh, no, this is too much. We can't handle it. But the actual fact is, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you will. And some people think, I don't want to feel this because, oh, my God, what if I'm so overwhelmed with it, I'm stuck with it forever? It's like, well, you're already stuck with it forever. By not allowing yourself to fully feel what's really going on with you, you are making it a permanent resident rather than allowing it to pass on through, which it will. Like the weather, it's just going to pass on through. If there was some way you could contain a thunderstorm and not let it move through, you could contain this and it would just rain on you forever. But happily, you can't do that. So those clouds pass through, they pass by, and then there's some different kind of weather. Well, your emotions are like that. Don't make them your enemy. With some other thing you can listen to, we've already talked about it on some of the other ones, and I'm sure we will again, as to how we create our emotional state through all of this feeling unsafe and our defensiveness and everything else. And once we've done that, then it's our job to let them pass on through instead of trying to dam them up. That's a really important, specific thing to do. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you.
So,
I'm glad you reinforced what I've been coming to know.
Wonderful. So let me ask you this last thing, since we've basically come to the end of our time, and that is, tell me how you feel. Not necessarily what you know or don't know, but tell me how you feel.
Right in this moment?
Uh-huh.
Depends on what part of my body. The part of my body that wants to have release and stuff, which I would say is in my gut, doesn't feel so good right now.
Okay, here's what I want you to do.
I would say everything from my heart up feels pretty good.
Okay, well, I wasn't actually thinking about your body. I was thinking more about your emotional state, but your body's good since you brought that up. So now what I want you to do is to put all your attention on the place where it feels tight.
Yeah, okay. I think lower intestine. Yeah.
Okay, in the lower intestines area. So what I want you to do is don't think. Because thinking at this point is just going to get in the way. It's not only not necessary, it's in the way. So put all of your attention, like your very loving, sweet, peaceful attention on that part of your body, not to do anything to it, not to fix it, but with that kind of open-hearted, it's fine with me that you're here exactly this way. It's that very open acceptance. Feel everything about you opening to accept this particular circumstance as you define it now. Just no pushing against it, no objecting to it. Just let it be. You're not doing anything except finally letting it be with a kind-hearted approach to it. It's fine to be this way. You can be this way as long as you want to. That's fine with me. And just breathe deeply as you do that. Are you breathing? Okay,
just
now
started.
I can hear a little,
Just started.
I can hear a little breathing. Okay. So what happens when you do that?
Well, I never thought that I wasn't allowing myself to think that I'm so angry at my wife for not being supportive. I feel like I'm doing absolutely the best I can do. And then my mind cuts that off and says, well, she doesn't have to support me. I mean, there's no money coming in, blah, blah, blah. She's got a perfect right to be like scared or whatever. She could be hassling me a lot more about it.
Okay, but see, now this isn't answering my question.
Right, I know. Let's go back into what's feeling on it. I'm feeling angry. I feel like I want to be supported. I feel like I'm reaching for the moon, and I want the moon for us. And the moon is not...
Great. What's happening is you're becoming aware, perhaps in a way that you haven't before, of I'm really carrying a lot of anger around with me.
Yeah, I feel like she trusts me.
Okay.
I should trust me. I should trust me.
And part of what's going on in your gut is just a whole bunch of rage. And you need to see that the anger is coming from not being true to yourself and just living by your old programming instead. So I wish we could talk longer. There are many other things to say, but we can't. But should you want to continue this just to do a regular private appointment, you can always do that. You can contact me later about that. But in any event, be open to yourself, be kind to yourself, realize now is the time that I grow out of and change that old defensive, I have to do what everybody else says, programming to now when I am true to myself, that's how I am most helpful to everyone else to get back to your opening statement about I need to do things for these other people. This is the way you do the very best for other people is be true to you. I hope that phrase, which I'm sure you've heard, takes on more meaning possibly than ever before. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I'm delighted we had a chance to visit, and I hope you feel much better starting right now.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Carol.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll tell you, I just truly love these conversations since I never have any idea where they will go. But also, I'm just reminded of something I need to hear at that moment always, just as I mentioned before we started. So often we have to return to this major idea that we create our emotional state, and then we block the movement of those emotions. Then they remain painful, and then we use our addictions and distractions to self-medicate. This is a major learned early survival strategy that must be unlearned. And that's what our work is all about. That's what A Course in Miracles is about. The whole thing is remedial, to dig us back up out of the hole we've gotten into. Now, if you would like to know more about how you might be getting in your own way, please do write to us at findingpeace@carolhowe.com, and we'll just take a look at your situation. So thank you so very much for joining us. Let any of these new ideas just sink in and ferment a little bit, and then we're going to look forward so much to your returning next week for our next episode of Seeing How Life Really Works. Speaking of, I have to remind you about our wonderful video series entitled See How Life Works by no coincidence. So go to carolhowe.com and order. They're 40% off now. People have loved these as a guide not only to practicing the course, but just to finally understand how life really works in the first place. So do not miss those. You'll really love them. And I'll surely look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful holiday. Bye for now.